Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about everyone's favorite subject, and that is Datacrons. We don't typically make a lot of videos on this just because they aren't applicable to the vast majority of the player base, but as I was going through this set, I saw quite a few things that stuck out to me as actually accessible for the majority of the player base, or at least the majority of the competitive player base within Kyber. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into a little bit of what this is going to look like. What do I mean when I'm talking about accessible? I think it's even fair to even use the word free to play. What do I mean by that? A lot of the times when we get these new Datacron sets, which we currently have, this is set 7. I'm not going to go throughout every single thing, but one thing I do want to make note of before we even get started is when CG brings these out, they have a tendency to include a lot of the really new characters that you can only have if you actually drop real money on the game. Like Sana Staros right now, I mean, she's 3 stars. She has to be at least a Relic 7 to use this. We're not going to be talking about her Datacron. We're not going to be talking about Zori Bliss's Datacron. We're not going to be talking about Rose Tico's Datacron, where they're all very good, and that's great and all, but I have no access to them, and a lot of you, I imagine, also don't have access to them. But there are some in here that are really stinking good of characters that we've all built up for roster building purposes, like Chewbacca. So that is really the purpose of this video, is trying to fill in some gaps of things that are actually achievable for us that can yield some really good results in both GAC and Territory Wars. So that being said, before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of all 6 teams that I think are going to be accessible for the majority of us, 2 things that I want to stay off before we even get started about set 7 that should actually be starting today, or at least Conquest will be starting today, where we can actually go in and farm them. Number 1, there is one really good stat, and that stat is going to be armor penetration. Armor penetration is going to be a really big deal in this coming set, because not only have people been building up defense sets for the last entire 2 months, we're also going to see armor and resistance in this current set. So these penetration stats are going to matter a lot, because a lot of the really strong teams out there, people have been building up for the last 2 months, like Gas and Malgus. They have these really huge defensive numbers that it's hard to chew through them, even with a normal counter we're used to without this. So that's just something to be on the lookout for just general use. Every team is really going to be able to use that. And if you want to know the difference between armor penetration and resistance penetration, just know that armor is typically more useful on the broader scale. But we actually do have a video talking about all the teams that can use resistance penetration really stinking well. So with that out of the way, the other note that I do want to make before we get into each specific team is that the level 3s for this set mostly suck. That is meant as a positive, because the level 3s aren't that good. That means we don't have to go around and get like 30 of them and apply them to every single light side team we have. We just have to worry about a few key teams. Again, this is good because when the value is in having 30 of the Datacrons, if you're free to play, you're going to struggle to ever get 30, period. So that being said, the one you do want to be on the lookout for is whenever allies inflict a debuff on enemy, they deal damage to that enemy's max health equal to 2%. That's going to do a lot with very debuff heavy teams. We'll get into 2 in particular, but I don't think it's going to be, again, different from armor penetration. It's not going to be this kill all that you're going to want to have on every single team. There are a lot of really good light side teams out there that really just don't even do any debuffs at all. Gas is one that comes to mind right away. So that being said, let's actually talk about the teams themselves, bringing this up. The 2 that I think are going to be the most important and the most accessible for all of us are going to be both Chewbacca and Vandor. These are going to be their level 9s. They're very good, and they actively change counters that are on the team, whether they be on the fence counters or just unlocking new ones entirely. For Chewbacca, the most important part of it is you are going to want his full-on level 9. Bringing up again, what exactly was that? That is the fact that if you get his, he is going to be immune to daze, which is huge because he's constantly assisting out of turn, and there actually are active counters that are being used to stop CLS, which are, again, I guess we talked about 3 times now, but Gas. Gas has an AoE daze, and that can really hinder this counter a lot. There's just a lot of daze out there in general right now, and whenever they use a basic, they gain 5% offense stacking, and all Rebel allies gain protection up for 1%, for 1 turn. That's huge. This is so huge. Not only are you immune today, so you have good utility, but you're also getting stacking offense, which is attacking every single turn. So every single time your Rebels run through a full turn, he has 25% offense. He is going to hit so stinking hard. And then on top of that, everyone also gets protection up for 1 turn, which is going to add to a lot of survivability. Every once in a while, when Datacrons come out, there are 1 or 2 characters that are able to punch up and start hitting Galactic Legends. I would not be shocked if this is that team, just because of the amount of things that they are being handed with this counter law. I think this might be enough damage to actually push the CLS team into beating SLKR teams without having to have a super ridiculous investment on. Also, whenever they land a critical hit, dispel all debuffs on them. So that's another nice thing that will help get rid of the cleanse. So if your Chewbacca does get dazed, your other Chewbacca, not 3PO, he is actually able to get it off. So I think that one is going to be one of the very first priorities for at least myself. As far as the level 6 and the level 3 to go on top of it, the ones that I think you really do want to aim for is the 2% max health damage, and then as well there is a level 6 turn meter that the droids have as well that can spread quite a bit of turn meter to both him and 3PO, bringing that up. At the start of the droid allies turns, they inflict target lock for 1 turn, which can't be resisted to a random enemy that doesn't have it. Whenever a droid uses a basic ability against an enemy with target lock, they recover 10% protection and gain 5% turn meter. So this isn't exactly that huge of a deal. And even the other turn meter one they have down below, whenever a debuff on an enemy expires, that allies gain 2% turn, double if that debuff was dispelled by an enemy. The CLS team does have a lot of debuffs, and while the only 2 droids you have are 3PO as well as 3PO and Chewbacca, the 2 of them, those gains are gonna be a little nice. I wouldn't sacrifice them too hard. Really, the level 9 is the highest priority, and level 3, I don't think it makes a huge difference, but the max health will help a lot. You're gonna get a lot of exposes. I'm not sure how many teams that you're gonna be fighting against are gonna be immune to max health. Like, unfortunately, you're just not gonna start beating Malgus just because the way that the debuffs actually interact in the team, it's not gonna be what pushes it over the limit. That being said, our next team that we need to look at is going to be another Chewbacca entirely, and that is going to be Vandor Chewbacca. And by the way, one thing that I should have mentioned probably towards the beginning of this, you can see that both my Vandor Chewbacca and my 3PO and Chewie, they're both Relic 5. To use a Datacron at level 7, you have to be R7. One of the things that I like about these 2 characters a lot is that they will genuinely benefit from being Relic 7 after this is all over. Obviously, I haven't taken them there now because I have other bigger projects to work on, like Jabba, that really I can't afford to whip away from Jabba to be able to go after these guys right now. But with the Datacron, it is that extra added incentive. And again, these characters will actually continue to use the relic levels to a very good extent afterwards. Right now, I relicked Phasma up to R7 for this set from 2 sets ago. And her being Relic 7 isn't gonna do me almost any good after the Datacron's gone. Vandor and 3PO, there actually is a lot of viability for Relic 7. Vandor, he is very hard to kill because he reduces damage across the board. On top of that, just has a lot of mechanics to keep him alive. Having him healthier is not a bad thing. It actually can move the needle in some fights. Same thing with 3PO. He's your damage dealer. He's going to be attacking at a turn every single time. Having 2 extra relic levels of DPS on him is nice. Maybe not mandatory for a lot of counters, but it is actually something that's going to be helpful after things are said and done. So getting back to Vandor, his level 7, again, or level 9 rather, I think is going to be one of the most game-changing along with our 3 bucket that we previously talked about. The first time he is defeated, he is revived with 100% health. He gains protection over time, 70% for turns, and takes a bonus turn. So very similar to the tank revive one that is currently out there right now, and Vandor actually is a tank, I believe. That being said, the Dash team loves to have all these revive mechanics, especially in GAC with his Omicron. They keep coming back constantly. The only one that can't be revived himself from that whole typical mechanic is Vandor Chewbacca, which makes him the first target to kill. So if you're taking in a Jedi Knight Rev, and I've used that multiple times this last week to be able to take down Dash, you're going to head in right for Vandor Chewbacca, and if you can mark him and get him killed before the mark wears off, then the team pretty much falls apart from there. Then you can kill anyone you want, doesn't matter. But if he's coming back, dropping the mark, and then Dash is starting to really rain on you, it's going to move the needle. You're going to start to stop counters that otherwise would be beating the Dash team, at least defensively. It is also nice, I guess, if you're wanting to do Dash versus JML on offense. Vandor dying is pretty much how that battle loses. If he can just keep on surviving and surviving and surviving, the battle keeps going on, and eventually Dash and whoever your other damage dealer will wear them down. That is a 3v3 counter, by the way, but overall it is a pretty good use. So this is just fantastic overall. Again, he's the one that you want to survive, and this gives him all the tools that he actually needs to do so. As far as the level 6 goes, I think, again, similar to the Rebel team, there are going to be a few different options, but the one that I think is going to be the most annoying is going to be the Retribution for 3 turns, which can't be dispelled at the very beginning. The Actually, it's under smuggler. Yeah, this is actually different from the rebel team. This is going to apply to all 5 of the characters that you have on your team. And when you have Dash countering you every single time, and if he's countering you and calling everyone into assist, and every time they crit you, they're getting turn meter, this is just going to spell massive amounts of problems for any team that can't just immediately delete him right away. It'll even help quite a bit for the teams that go out in front, like troopers or bounty hunters. They're going to have to take hits on L3 or whoever it is for them to be able to get going. And when they do, if they're getting countered the entire time and those counters are critting, the Dash team is going to start to gain the it's going to start to gain turn meter in advance and is eventually going to meet him. So very good way to offset that there. And then again, the level 3, I don't think it matters. Crit damage every single time you crit 4 times could be good. Dash is going to build that one up pretty easily. Or even like the max health damage with debuffs. They do a fair amount of debuffs. I mean, I think Dash does like 12 on one hit or something like that. But those are going to be the main 3. Your actual Vandor Chewbacca level 9, the Retribution, and then the other one. It is worth noting, if you for whatever reason have Kira Relict, hers is pretty good too and pairs really well with the Stagger one for level 6. I think that's going to be very good for a lot of people. It won't be good for me personally, just because Kira's not a character that I would really have Relic right away, much like Vandor is quite necessary. So that being said, moving on to our next set. The next 2, we're going to move out of the level 9s. Typically free to play. If you're only doing the 50 crystal refreshes, you can only get about 2 level 9s total. And even then, it becomes difficult if you don't get the right rerolls and you end with some other random character that you may not even have unlocked, like an Eus on Astaros. The next 2 teams I want to look at are General Grievous as well as Jedi Training Rey. General Grievous is a little bit awkward just because the droids and the dark side just got one last time. But I think there still is a little bit, if you didn't get anything good from that, to benefit from the current one. And what's really interesting, I'm not going to be that narrow on what he can use. The droids have a lot of really good level 6s that he can definitely benefit from. Putting the target lock out on every one of them, getting turn meter whenever they hit it, is really going to close the gap on the turn meter train that General Grievous already has with Newt. Can be very effective against Starkiller. The 2% turn meter doubled if that debuff was dispelled by an enemy is also pretty helpful. They just get love turn meter. And even the Retribution, that's going to be nasty. Almost all teams that go against Grievous move before Grievous does. It's very much a reactionary team. So if they're getting countered every single time, and a lot of those basics have target lock, they're eventually just going to start catching up to you. And even this next one, whenever allies target another ally with an ability, they both gain 5% defense, max health, max protection, and offense until the end of the battle. I've found this to be very underwhelming on most factions because most factions or most characters don't have an ability that specifically calls another one every single turn. B1 does. B1 specifically targets another ally to heal every single time he goes, so he's going to be constantly building up that other character's max health, max protection, offense, whatever. So if you're constantly targeting Grievous and just feeding him into max health, that's really good. That's really stinking good. So I think there's a very wide amount of variability. Even this last one, whenever debuff on an enemy expires, allies gain 2% potency and tenacity. B2 and Magna both love potency and tenacity. A very good stat. So the vast majority of these work. I guess maybe try to avoid a few kind of the loser-ish ones, but overall Grievous can do a whole lot with this set. Next up is going to be JTR team. This for me is actually going to be the Rey team, but I think one thing that's going to be super annoying is just going to be the Retribution. To beat Rey, you have to kind of take control from the very beginning, whether it be with JML or with Starkiller, with stunning them and whatnot. And if they're all constantly countering you, just causing all types of problems, cleansing from whatever you have on there via Rey using her basic, it's going to get really annoying, really stinking fast. I don't know if it's enough to hard stop those 2 counters, but it's going to start to close the margins, where if it was close before, it's going to just stop it entirely. So that's going to be really annoying. Or even if you have a JTR team, also just going to be really annoying because every single time they counter and they crit, they're going to get an exposed, and they can, again, similar to the Dash team, they can start getting the turn meter train going in reverse on you. So very good level 6 for JTR or Rey, and then Grievous just has a lot going in those 4 particular areas. So reminder, the Chewbacca as well as the Vandor one, these are going to be my level 9s. These 2 right here are going to be very important for level 6s. And last but not least are going to be our 2 level 3s. Bad Batch as well as our Adrad team, I think, are going to benefit a lot from the level 3 that we already talked about in the very beginning. What do we talk about the level 3? The one that every single time a debuff is dealt, they're going to deal 2% of that enemy's max health damage. Both Rogue One and Bad Batch deal debuffs constantly. Rogue One is handing out debuffs like hotcakes, or rather exposes like hotcakes, and then Bad Batch in general, I think almost every single character just has a slew of debuffs that you can really, again, teams that aren't immune to debuffs, or rather max health damage, you can just immediately cut them down. I think there might be something to say about the stacking health points for the Rogue One team, just because this team's game, or the whole point of this team, is to survive long enough for Adrad to get his quote-unquote ultimate, and then as soon as he's done, or as soon as he gets that, you just run over the entire team. So overall, those are the 6 ones that I think are most accessible for free-to-play, and as a general reminder, try to get as much armor penetration or resistance penetration as you can, because it's going to have the most all-around viability. But, until the next time, stay awesome.